Welcome back to BMC Exchange. I'm John Powers, Vice President of Federal U.S. Enterprise at BMC today. And today we're going to have a panel discussion on the topic of centralized autonomy in the federal enterprise. Joined by three subject matter expert panelists. Let me take a minute here and introduce them. Vinny Lima from VVL. VVL Systems and Consulting is a small business focusing on IT optimization through product services for cloud, infrastructure, and end-user capabilities. VVL is a BMC Elite partner providing a spectrum of product and services for both federal and commercial clients. Vinny is the managing director for VVL. So thank you, Vinny. And Vinny, what is this? This is, like I said, we just talked about this isn't necessarily an industry-wide term, but how does VVL view this?
Yeah, John, first and foremost, thank you for having us here for this panel. And Sean is absolutely right. Centralized autonomy, in our perspective, has been a maturity model that's been happening, in the federal space. And the way that we see how is it defined is the ability for especially federated agencies to have a variety of organizations under a single umbrella to be allowed to explore technologies, especially in the day of the cloud, of AI, and a lot of leading edge technologies that are changing, adapting all the time on a daily basis. It's allowing them to explore and to also define and model the enterprise processes to what works best for them within a set of parameters, as Sean mentioned, and really yield a set of capabilities that are going to be best suited for their mission, but still aligning to a strategic vision, a strategic goal, and as I usually say, is a set of controls or bumper guards to make sure that cost, risk, and benefits are realized and shared across these multiple entities under a single umbrella.
All right, so now that we've essentially defined what it is a little bit, let's talk. Vinny, and as we look at what are the real benefits to doing it, right? Why is it something that's worth pursuing? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, John. So, the real challenge is, there's process technology, right, and there's people. But as technology evolves so fast, having a centralized mandate really poses challenges for some of these agencies, right? For having the freedom for true autonomy for what they need to do within their mission space, as often those directives do not provide the flexibility that's often needed, right? And that need changes, right? Every office or agency is going to have a mission that changes with time. And so the ability to have the challenge of having a centralized mandate, it's counter to the mission directives that they have to deliver on a day-to-day basis, right? Now, the opposite is that when there's no centralized direction or mission, often agencies are counter to the benefits for the greater good, and as well as they don't take advantage of cost, consolidation, or the taxpayer benefits. And even more, ability for different organizations to learn from each other. They're going through their own mission and they end up putting a barrier to sharing the benefits and the lessons learned. So, for example, when we worked with USDA for their multi-cloud and hybrid cloud capability, the focus was on a centralized, secure capability that met a set of regulatory standards, such as FedRAMP. But what we found once we had the capability that was offered by OCIO and we started talking to individual agencies, each agency has a specific niche and need or specific capabilities out of that cloud offering that needed to be adapted because some agencies were more mature than others. Some had applications that were already optimized for the cloud, some did not. And so working with the OCIO, we were able to define, as I mentioned before, the bumper guards when using cloud in alignment with their corporate standards.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I love the proof point. Yeah, so what we start to get into and really delve into is whether that's tools or operational rationalization of things, right? And sometimes those are I mean, is it safe to say that those are both cultural, people, technological, and operational challenges all kind of bundled into one there? So, Vinny, your thoughts on the barriers to, to start down that road.
Yeah, John, and I think both panelists bring up a very common set of criteria that are typical barriers. As I was preparing for this conversation, I outlined three things that I'd like to talk about. One is people. I think we talked about that. There's a real, I won't say it's fear. It's a real lack of certainty. I think I put a parallel to this or a similarity to when automation, think about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when automation started taking place into enterprises. There's a lot of insecurity around adopting new ideas because either became a fear of job security or a fear of responsibility and visibility and ability to act onto your area of domain of expertise. But I think people is going to be really key. As we talk about this centralized autonomy, it's a thin line to kind of convey that centralized directives are okay but you have to have a feedback, right? And if you can make people comfortable in getting the feedback that what they say and what they're asking matters into the centralized autonomy, then you have a win-win. The other piece I found also working with federal agencies in this type of model is process agility. How often have we all met? We had discussed, we love this idea, love this concept, but it doesn't fit into an existing process. And as we all know, process in the federal government takes a while to change, right? It's a long journey, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that the last piece is a challenge around organizational authority versus how budgets are allocated. Now, we talked about this briefly, is, when you talk about having some shiny new capability that has a lot of benefits to a lot of missions, sometimes you can present, but you can't force because the budget and the buying authority sits within a different line of business, doesn't sit at the CIO office, right? And so those three things are areas I found are barriers that we have to have patience, you have to work through, and you have to just educate people around why the benefits are great for the organization.
How important is it then, I mean, as we consider, the barriers standing in the way to, evangelizing and who owns that, right? Is that, who really has to own that in some of these groups? What do you guys think on that?
I'll add here, Sean, just to continue what I was mentioning. I think there's a responsibility on both sides, right? There is, the motto of, if you build it, they will come. You have to continue to prototype. You have to continue to show what is possible. But at the same time, you're going to have from an authority perspective, to also drive some pursuits and initiatives to make this happen. The things I noted down here that we keep talking about is communication. In this new term, one of the things that we found is also you almost have to think about as a marketer, right? You have to think about how can you consistently and continuously communicate effectively the benefits of centralized autonomy. And that's where the boots on the ground, I think, as Sean mentioned, is very valuable. But you got to communicate, you got to market, and you got to solicit the feedback, because this centralized autonomy doesn't work, in my opinion, if you don't have feedback loop to put back into your mission.
Yeah, I love that. I love that statement, and tying back to essentially the benefit of the mission is, and you guys are talking a lot about, creating change agents and having others draft behind them, which makes a lot of sense. But while maintaining, someone that's got to have essentially some of the vision and some of the ability to, for lack of a better word, strengthen that vision and evangelize that, right? So, all right. So, in looking at organizations that you've all worked with, and we see it all the time, they may be looking at that today, and there's change agents out there that are looking at it and saying, I'm in various stages of their own maturity continuum, saying, all right, I'm at step A, and how do I get over to EFG? So as we look at that, sometimes that can be somewhat overwhelming, right? And that can often lend itself to, apathy to a degree, right? And we all have seen that, right? So as organizations and certain folks are looking at things and saying, all right, what are the considerations to think about? What are some of the ways that I can begin this journey? What are some ways that, we were just talking about change agents, and then, people saying and looking, like, hey, what's happening over here? Let's go take a look. What are some of the considerations, or do you start from some foundational things? Do you start from what the end in mind is, right? Do you start from, hey, I think there's a real benefit to doing this. Who are the people that I need to change opinions to? Some of those kind of things. So you're touching on a number of different areas as you look at considerations of, and all essentially kind of tying back to some of the what is it that we're trying to address? What is the end in mind here? Where do we want to be? And then, almost, essentially assessing that or measuring that, and there's going to be some things that break down as a result of that. So, Vinny, what are your thoughts on, a number of different areas that we're talking about as organizations look to begin that journey, and starting there, and there's some foundational pieces certainly that Sean just touched on quite a bit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think the big thing that we all have to realize is that the federal government look upon us to be trusted advisors, right? And what does a trusted advisor mean? It means telling them and advising them, obviously in an eloquent way, when to do and when not to do things based on our experience. Like Sean mentioned, we all have collectively a lot of, keyboard time and time on the street around learning what works and what doesn't work. And I took a couple of bullet points that I felt are important for agencies who are listening to this. Think about how do they start. Absolutely do not try to solve the world's problem. Do not try to boil the ocean, right? There's a term that I learned from a good friend of mine around failing fast. Don't be afraid of that. Fail fast is a great methodology, especially when what we typically do, you wrap around an agile methodology for how you are collecting requirements, to prioritizing requirements, vetting them with your executive sponsor, vetting them with your customer, applying them, and then you collect and you assess. Was it successful? And do it fast. Do it within days, weeks. And one of the big things around the agencies that prevent that agility also comes down to contracting, right? You want to be able to measure your contract performance. You want to be able to provide feedback to your contractors and your customers. Is it working? Is it not working? Are there barriers? Can we make changes to improve that so that federal agencies can buy from industry and get what they want at the right time? So I'm always big from a contract perspective. And then the last piece, talking about the fail fast methodology, lean forward, disrupt. I think, in federal government, we always look at federal government as the stable boat, right? It's always going in a trajectory that changes slowly. And that's okay, but don't be afraid of introducing new thoughts, new ideas. You're looking at technologies. There's so many options for federal agencies to evaluate and to assess with minimal risk. What does cloud mean to me? Do I really understand the shared responsibility model around risk and security, right? Work with your industry partners to understand. And then last but not least, technology choices. We talked about BMC Helix. SaaS, is something that it's been a slow uptick and an adoption with the federal government. But you look in the past year, maybe two, the procurements have come out for SaaS-based services, especially those that have a very low level of risk to entry. They're highly secure. They're accredited for your organization up to the highest levels for you to do things like measure your cloud cost, cloud spend, measure your cloud security. We talked about previous customer. We leverage Helix Cloud Security to provide real insight before information security was even aware, right? So those are the kind of things I always like to lean forward. because it drives that organizational change. It drives people to think about what's possible, and then you tune back, right? You kind of find the middle ground of what is acceptable within your agency.
No, I love it, and some of the things both of you are talking about is winning, assessing, and measuring in a way that's quick and agile. And I think one of the things, Vinny, you just said that it's really interesting around boiling the ocean. We see a lot of large projects sometimes that for whatever reason never really get kind of the fulfillment that they have. So probably as we talked about change agents before, and then others drafting behind them, and seeing the benefit that they're getting. It's an interesting journey that as we look at the ways to impact and have change, right? Especially within federal, especially given the fact of some of these folks, whether they may transition, or in the DoD side they may PCS to another duty station. Those kind of things are all impactful to this, right? So when one of the things we were just talking about, and I think both Bob and Vinny talked about it a little bit, is defining what success is, right? Is that a critical piece? And then having an operational rhythm where we're revisiting, okay, the overall vision and where you want to go. Is that of critical importance with these organizations? Yeah. As we look at moving to, centralized autonomy? I mean, is that a critical piece of this, or is Sean was just kind of saying, do we get lost in the weeds of the day-to-day? That's certainly, we're all, everyone is nobody's immune to that, right?
Yeah, centralized autonomy, in my opinion, does not work if you don't have the communication and a set of expectations on what the success expectation, either centrally or from each autonomous units, business units, organizations, agencies, right? You have to communicate what is your criteria for success, and then both sides. I mean, you have to evolve into a cooperating, functioning agency in the way that you can pick, adopt, reason the technology choices, and also implementation and consumption tactics.
Coming up, as I think we close on this, we talked a lot of, covered a number of different areas on this topic, and there are a number of different, I think, benefits and obvious areas to really achieve and grow. I think where we've centered on is, certainly there's got to be a vision there, but then clear lines of what is it that you're trying to measure and where you're trying to go, and consistency to that with a set of optics around an operational rhythm of a review of that, right? And I love the analogy, Bob, but I think that's a perfect point to say, hey, do I need to look at the forest differently? It's perfect. So because it is a changing landscape, and whether it's operational or technology. So I want to thank all of you guys, Bob, Sean and Vinny. I appreciate, thank you for joining us here today.